Hello and welcome to Books from Your Therapist, a podcast where we talk to therapists and mental health practitioners about their mental health related book recommendations. By mixing book talk with mental health, we hope to open up the conversation around books your therapist may have suggested and make them more accessible.
This podcast is not a substitute for mental health care. It's for educational and entertainment purposes only. I'm Amanda Throckmorton, a marriage and family therapist in California.
And I'm Tara Kremen, and I work in the book industry in Toronto, in Canada. This month's guest is writer Amanda McCracken. Amanda is an award-winning journalist passionate about experiences that highlight the intersection of wellness, travel, and relationships. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, The Washington Post, The Guardian, Vogue, among many others. We talk with Amanda about her debut book, When Longing Becomes Your Lover, breaking from infatuation, rejection, and perfectionism to find authentic love. The second book that we discuss is Love and Limerence, The Experience of Being in Love by Dorothy Tennov. Amanda's book, When Longing Becomes Your Lover, explores what happens when our deepest desires begin to occupy more emotional space than we realize. Whether we're longing for a relationship, healing, purpose, or a different future, longing can quietly become something we nurture, protect, and even build our identity around. Rather than offering quick fixes, Amanda invites readers to examine their relationship with longing itself, asking how we can acknowledge our unmet desires without allowing them to define us.
Love and Limerence by psychologist Dorothy Tennov was a groundbreaking work that introduced the term limerence to describe the intense emotional state that many people experience in early stages of romantic attraction. Tennov argues how obsession, uncertainty, idealization, and the longing for reciprocation can create an all-consuming psychological experience that feels very different from mature, enduring love. Although the book was first published in 1979, its insight feels remarkably relevant in today's world of dating apps, social media, and constant connection. It was such a nice conversation with Amanda to just hear about her experience and journey and to dig a little bit deeper into limerence, which is a topic that not everyone knows, but many people might experience. And we just had a great time talking to her. Hi, Amanda. Welcome to Books from Your Therapist.
Thank you for having me, Tara and Amanda.
We would just love if you could give a little bit of an intro for our listeners about who you are.
Well, my name's Amanda McCracken, and I am the author of the relatively new book, When Longing Becomes Your Lover. And I'm also a journalist and a university writing instructor and a massage therapist and the mom to a almost 6-year-old. And I live in Boulder, Colorado.
You have a lot of different aspects of your personality and just different things that you've pursued. I'm curious how you got into writing.
Yeah, I mean, my book, I think, even reflects that. Like, I kind of like dipping into lots of different genres and sciences and so forth. I'd always enjoyed writing and started writing articles actually as a coach, as a triathlon coach for the company that I was coaching for, because they wanted their coaches to create content for their blog. And then I was like, wait a second, I can actually make money doing this and not just give it away. So that's how I started, was writing, why heel repeats make you a faster 5K runner, or, how to recover from XYZ injury. So that's how it started.
And a triathlete. Do you still do triathlons?
I don't. I still more so do. I've had, honestly, so many friends that have been hurt and killed on bikes these days that I don't get on my bike very often. I still swim and run a lot. And occasionally I'll do like a swim run race, or just a swim race, or just a running race.
I did my first sprint triathlon last year. It was kind of my thing before I turned 40, was wanting to just try and do something just sort of a little outside of my wheelhouse. And I was like, my partner used to do a lot of triathlon. So I was like, oh, I get it. I get why people like get really into this. It was, oh my gosh, the energy of just the people there. And it was just like such a special experience. So I'm itching to do another one, but
it's great cross training, right? You're not just focusing on one thing. So
yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. Hopefully, if the body allows, maybe I'll get another one in at some point.
I'd say that I'll try to, but that would be a lie. I'll leave the athleticism to both Amandas on the call. But before we jump into your book, When Longing Becomes Your Lover, that I'm excited to chat about, is there anything else that you wanted to share, either professionally or personally?
I guess I'm just really grateful that I got to get this book out in the world and share these stories and share the stories of other people that I've interviewed. And I feel like I come hopefully from a grateful heart that I'm here talking with you guys now.
Well, let's jump in then to your book, When Longing Becomes Your Lover. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, I really started writing parts of it as a way of me trying to untangle myself from my own patterns. I had a couple essays that went viral, and one of them was in the New York Times titled, Does My Virginity Have a Shelf Life? And I was 35 when that was published. And I thought, wow, this really hit a nerve. This there's more to it, And as I was, started working on this book idea, even when I was like 35, 36, 37, and I was working on the proposal and so forth, I still had a lot of my life to live and quote unquote mistakes to make and a lot to learn, which is why I think it took as long as it did before it got published and it was complete.
So can you give listeners who haven't read it just sort of an overview of the book?
Sure. So When Longing Becomes Your Lover, breaking from infatuation, perfectionism, and rejection to find authentic love is I've heard recently somebody call it an investigative memoir, which I really like, that it gives the idea that, which is true, that it's part my story, but also investigative, trying to figure out why was I falling in love with the feeling of love or seemingly love, and why was it so hard for me to get into a healthy and stable relationship. And so through it, I take the reader through my own story, and each chapter is broken up into kind of different themes, but it's also chronological. And in each chapter, I weave in research and or stories from others that I've interviewed that had found themselves kind of caught in the same traps. And the goal at the end is to obviously help people who've also found themselves stuck with longing being their lover, longing for love, as opposed to actually getting into a loving relationship, help those individuals identify their own patterns and find ways out of the trap or the tunnel they feel like they've been stuck in.
The title is really evocative, and I know you don't always get to choose your own title when you're a writer. So were you involved at all in the title of this? What was that process like with the publisher?
Yeah, that title, they would have had to fight me tooth and nail, I think, to get rid of. But it really stems from a session I had with my therapist, who was, after I had been disclosing another tale of a kind of mistake I had made. And she was like, Amanda, longing is your lover. And it was like this aha moment, and this light bulb went off like, crap, that's right. Like, this is true. I mean, that's very poetic. Thank you. But also it's like, how on earth do you get through that and get to the other side? And so that's where the title came from. And the breaking from infatuation, rejection, perfectionism to find authentic love, a true story of overcoming limerence, was something that I worked on with my editor, but I had a lot of say in it too.
That's great. That's great that you had the kind of the direction there, because I feel like When Longing Becomes Your Lover really captures what the book is about, and you kind of, it stops you, but it also is a bit of a, if you're familiar with what happens in limerence at all, it might stop you and be like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I've had people that are like, gosh, I know what that is. I'm not ready to read that.
I mean, the way it's, because you do say this in the book, like I remember the part about the therapy session, and when the therapist sounds like an awesome therapist, which I love to hear, shares that like little nugget of information or reflection back. I was like, oh, it's so cool to watch it kind of unfold in the book. And I know I was reading and really resonating with a lot of the experience of limerence, and it's something I actually never learned about in grad school as a therapist, which is so fascinating to me, because reading this, I was like, I felt like a lot of my young self in this, and just things that I've experienced, and was like, oh, wow, I definitely have had this experience before. And so it felt powerful to see it sort of written out in such a vulnerable way and get to kind of follow your journey. But I guess for listeners who don't know what limerence is, could you define what that is?
Sure. And yeah, I think there are a lot of therapists who don't know what limerence is or are just learning. And even my therapist really helped me work through, I think, the majority of my kind of issues before she really understood and knew what limerence was too. So limerence is this psychological term coined in the late 70s by Dorothy Tennov, an experimental psychologist, to describe like this involuntary obsessive rumination. And I would say sometimes obsessive because I feel like there's a spectrum. And again, I'm not a psychologist or therapist, but that's what it seems. There's so much more to be peeled back and understanding limerence. But this sometimes obsessive rumination over a love interest that you've put on a pedestal, that you've idealized, there's some sense of unavailability, whether it's real or just in your head. And it's really fueled by hope and uncertainty. There's definitely a deep fear of rejection, and can be a roller coaster of emotions from euphoria to despair, grief, even. And it can feel really addictive.
And how would you say it differs from, I mean, I guess I'm understanding it as like an imbalanced relationship, whereas with love, would you say that that's more of a reciprocal, you're meeting someone on a certain level? Like, what would you say the difference is between limerence, love, or even longing?
Yeah, and that's a tricky question, I think. But I think what Dorothy was trying to get across was that limerence is that the initial feeling of falling in love. It's really this feeling, but ultimately it's not love, and that's why like her book is called Love and Limerence, to differentiate the two. And I think of longing as being like the bigger umbrella, and then limerence is one kind of longing. I feel like grief is another kind of longing, and then with regards to what I understand now as love, and spoiler alert that I feel like I'm on the other side of limerence and have experienced real love. Like limerence usually goes away when you sense that the other person is interested in you, because poof, the uncertainty is gone, and you're not lingering in hope. You know what the case is. If somebody is very certain, no, I am not interested in you, this will never ever happen, then the limerence can go away, although some people still can be very tenacious. So, and often nobody is really that clear, right? They'll be like, oh, I just see you as a friend, or let me think about it, because they're too worried about hurting your feelings. And so you're still left in limbo. But love is the security. I think the key piece, right, is that there's security and trust in love, and no way Jose in limerence.
Right. And maybe with love more, like we did an episode on love a while back and talked about it being sort of like it's an action, it's a verb, it's someone that's meeting you and showing you by practice, right? And that seems to be a tenet of limerence that doesn't exist. And it makes me think about someone who Dorothy calls the LO, the limerent object, receiving this, and how, to your point, there's so many mixed signals because maybe that feels flattering to them, right? And even though they're not reciprocating or don't want that, it feels hard, or it seems like it would be hard for someone to be so direct and like, I'm not interested in this with you, you know?
Right, exactly. Yeah, which is why I think not a lot, but maybe that a lot of limerents tend to maybe get stuck with their LO who's a narcissist, or narcissists like that attention. So it's easy to stay stuck in limerence with somebody who's a narcissist because they're enjoying it and they're potentially going to keep feeding it to you until they've gotten their narcissistic fuel, is what I understand.
Yeah. One big part of your book, which was really interesting, was just your experience like as a Christian, and you talk a lot about how purity culture can fuel limerence. Can you speak a little bit about this?
Yeah. So a big piece and part of my story is that I was a late in life virgin and waiting to have sexual intercourse until I was a committed and loving relationship. But I kept sabotaging by dating people who were quite unavailable and just falling into limerent fantasy one after the other. And I think early on, purity culture for me was just a seed that helped like germinate those limerent experiences later. One of many seeds, I think, too. And for people who don't know and understand what purity culture is, it was this movement in the 90s that really encouraged young people, teens especially, to like sign celibacy pledges. They'd wait until marriage to have sex. And so abstinence before marriage, that kind of thing. And for me, I think, and a lot of other people, limerence became a safe place to hide because that way you could just put somebody on a pedestal, just like you had Jesus, especially in the music we listened to that was very confusing. It was like, is this really talking about Jesus or is this talking about my boyfriend? And there was even a genre called Jesus is My Boyfriend songs.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a teen growing up with that and in these rah-rah like groups, we're listening to this music, it could get very confusing. And so it was easy to kind of put Jesus on a pedestal, but also put your LO, that person that you idealized, on a pedestal and keep them there and you kind of down below. And then you could just ruminate about what that potential relationship might be and never actually cross over into the vulnerability of real intimacy with that person and not ever make a mistake.
I mean, it's interesting because alongside the purity aspect is we were also getting so much messaging as a kid that was a 90s kid. Like, think about the Disney movies or, it's like not, it doesn't even have to be affiliated to religion at all, but it's all the messaging as a little girl where like you're waiting for this prince or you see the Little Mermaid give up her voice. Like, it's like all these things were kind of idealized in so many different ways at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The Little Mermaid, I think, is the perfect example of limerence, giving up her voice for someone she's hasn't even spoken with. But yeah, lots of examples in Disney.
Yeah.
And the rom-coms. I feel like
Yeah,
a lot of the rom-coms I grew up with that I just adored.
I think about 90s Ireland sometimes. When I describe it to people, it feels like I actually lived in 50s Ireland, like being taught by nuns in convents, So it's like, it's, we've come a long way. But I hadn't heard of the term limerence at all before I read your book. So thanks for kind of opening my eyes to that piece. And you write about longing as if it's a relationship in itself. So I'm just curious because, I just feel like that resonated with me. But what are some of the ways that people are unintentionally becoming emotionally attached to what they don't have instead of like actually engaging with the things that they do have?
Yeah, I love that question about longing being like a relationship in and of itself. Like, for people who feel like they have to prove themselves, prove their self-worth, their value to be in a healthy relationship, then limerence and longing is a great place to hang out because you can kind of just continually, chase after, even if only mentally, that person that you want to prove yourself to. And as an athlete, like I grew up feeling like if I didn't suffer enough, then it wasn't worth it. Nothing was worth it. So somebody who's like, I love you, you're great, I want to spend more time with you, I want to be transparent, you think something must be wrong. Like I'm missing something here and you're too good to be true. So, and you're boring because you're way too available. It's too easy. Love is not supposed to feel easy is what, I felt like I'd grown up learning. So it's got to be a journey. Yeah.
It's like that idea of, I guess with a lot of rom-coms as well, like feeling the butterflies or like your body like having a reaction or a sensation. But actually that may not be the most healthy if you're only used to, I don't know, like relationships that aren't working out or things like that. So yeah, I can see how it can be so much easier to stay with one thing and just stay in that longing rather than actually pushing it further and exploring.
Yeah, I think when you get used to those and associating the butterfly feelings, which may be actually just anxiety, right, with associating with love, then if you get into a more stable, secure relationship, you're like, I don't really feel that kind of anxiety that like literally with the artist would make me have to go to the bathroom. So.
And your book is a really personal one. You've spoken already about working with your therapist on stuff to kind of get through your limerence. And just in your own journey, was there a particular moment or catalyst that made you realize that longing had become something more than just a feeling for you?
Well, I think that moment with my therapist when she said, longing is your lover, that was an aha moment Another moment with her, and I think I have this in the book too, was when I said to her, like, I was trying to make my therapist feel better. Like, I'll figure it out. Don't worry. I'm going to do my homework. I'm going to figure it out. And she was like, no, Amanda, you will never figure it out. You have to feel your way through it. And I would just broke down crying because I was like, I do not want to feel my way through it. I want to think my way out of it because that's what I had always tried to do. Those were probably two key moments. I think the scene when I go to visit the doctor and he never shows and never shows. That was like probably my hitting rock bottom moment.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking to read.
Yeah.
Like, you're kind of like, just wanted to give you a hug.
I know.
I think my mom at that point was probably like both feeling like, oh, heartbroken and be like, enough, enough is enough.
I think your book was interesting because it also touched on like dating apps and like social networks nowadays and how that sort of might be more of a catalyst for longing. I think you even talked about how like social disconnection can kind of make us rely on longing more. Can you speak about this a little bit?
I think a couple things lead to us like stuck longing for knowledge about what the other person is thinking. One of them is hookup culture, which, I think some people say is kind of going away, but I'll be teaching freshmen this year at CU, and I'll be curious to hear if any of them disclose whether that's true or not. But the main tenets of hookup culture are that it's meaningless, that you don't let on that something was meaningful. And so, of course, you're left wondering what, if anything, was meaningful and how to proceed and what does that person think and what should I say? And you don't want to catch feelings, because that's not cool. But then you can just scroll incessantly on Instagram feeds and other social media to try to figure out what that person thinks, what they're doing, study them, research, and which I would fill my time with, okay, if the person's not interested, the person's not getting back to me, I'll just study them. I'll get to know them better, and then I'll prove my self-worth in that way. And then I think, this is with the prevalence of ghosting and the low accountability in dating, and people are getting sick of the apps, obviously, now, but it'll be a while, I think, before people, I don't know if ghosting how long that will, remain okay.
Yeah, it's interesting because there is like the trend at the moment is like the analog summer. And I see young folks getting more interested in like CDs. And I say the phrase young folks there, it makes me sound like I'm 100, but like in-person experiences and more like media that's not on the internet. So I wonder how that will affect like dating and hopefully people just meeting up in person. But I know that's so hard these days, but it'll be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how much more maybe matchmakers might take over. It seems like those are quite pricey, though. So,
what's interesting, I think, with the dating apps, and we don't have to stay on this for too long, but like there's also these trends that come out. There's a term like breadcrumbing, which is like you're giving someone like a little bit. It's like I almost think ghosting is a kinder thing to do than something like that. Like that feels like that would be like limerent fuel, right? Like you're giving me just enough to still maintain hope here. Right. So it's
True.
like, it's interesting to think about just all the bad behavior, I guess. It's like all the bad behavior. Yeah.
Right. And that's what, I learned that the neuroscientists call that intermittent reinforcement, where you're just getting just enough and you don't know when it's coming, that validation. So you just kind of stay on the hook, hoping that it's going to come back again.
That makes my body shake a little bit. No, thank you. To switch gears a second, I'm curious about the writing process because you've written like essays and articles, but I'm just wondering how it was transitioning to writing like a long form book. Was it challenging? Did you jump right in?
It was very challenging. Yeah, I was just telling my friend that I feel like my ADHD self in perimenopause is very fried from trying to stay as organized as I was for like a year and a half. And that's a whole nother thing, right? Talking about how I feel like ADHD led to the limerence too, because of it. I naturally hyperfixated on somebody who seemed really interesting and novel at the time. But the writing process, I had started writing lots of snippets of this earlier. Even like a letter that I had written to the doctor, I turned into material for the book. The details that I kept, like I had studied him and wove that into there's also the layers of like running it by my mom in certain sections and be like, is this okay? What do you feel comfortable with? What do you not? And getting a lot of sign-offs on people who I'd interviewed and making sure that they felt okay with their story. Do they want their name? Do they not want their name? There's a lot of research that I wove into, so that was excruciatingly painful to like make sure I had all of the end notes. And there are a lot of people out there these days that just throw out a book, influencers, and have no end notes whatsoever. I'm seeing more and more of this, and that is very frustrating to see. But that was very important to me to make sure that it was like backed up. I backed it up academically, and I have to remind myself like when some of the best thing that came out of writing the book, even before I had the book deal, was that I felt like I was writing my way into a healthy relationship before I even started, before I had this book deal and so forth. So once I came across that research about writing and specific kinds of writing and how that can be helpful, I was like, wow, that's exactly what I was doing all that time. So that was fun to see.
I love this idea. I think we talked about this last time on the podcast too, of like people naturally find their way towards healing. Like, yes, of course, I believe in therapy and all these things. And I don't think therapy is by far the only way to go through a healing experience. But a lot of us, like our bodies will move us towards a state of health if we like allow ourself to move there. So it's cool to hear about the writing process for you. And I mean, it's a wonderfully written and very vulnerable book. And I was like so grateful to read it because I was like, I could see a lot of my, like I said, younger self in part of this too. I was like, wow, this is really great to kind of see your story and read more about it. I guess if someone who is listening is feeling like stuck in a season of waiting, whether that's like longing for a relationship or hoping for a different future, do you have an idea from your book that you would like them to carry after they read it?
I hope that readers take away that everybody has their own timeline. So I think that's important to remember so they don't feel like they have to keep up with somebody else's timeline with regards to relationships and family and so forth. And that no matter how much something becomes part of your identity, like we talked about longing becoming, I had this relationship with longing. And for a while I was like, who would I be if I wasn't hopeless romantic single Amanda searching for love? That was so much how people identified me for so long. And it felt like an inescapable almost identity. And sometimes fun to wallow in, as weird as that might sound. But later on in the book, I don't know if you picked up on this, there's the chapter Dave the Watchmaker, and I have a couple symbols of the triangle, and I have the triangle back here for change. But yeah, the change is always possible. And I've heard from several people they felt like they got a lot of hope out of my book. And that's what I hope people walk away with, this sense of hope for their future and that change is possible when they're ready to seek it.
Well, let's jump into the second book, the book of your choosing. We've mentioned it a couple of times already, but this is Love and Limerence by Dorothy Tennov. So why did you pick this book?
I feel like it was kind of a natural companion to my own.
Agreed.
And it was one that I went to when I was studying limerence and trying to better understand it. And I mean, she's the woman, who coined it all. So I was like, I got to understand what she was talking about here and how she came about doing her research.
So if listeners aren't familiar, could you give us an overview of Love and Limerence?
Yeah, it is Dorothy Tennov's gathering of all of her research based on interviews and journals and questionnaires that people had filled out as she was differentiating what was love, what was limerence, and what were the patterns that people were facing, whether they were single or married, divorced, or widowed. And it goes through, what it is and looks at culture, looks at whether or not it's something you can control. It looks at the perspective, I think, also of the non-limerent, and also the LO's perspective, which is something, if I could go back, I have thought it would be really interesting if I had the guts to reach out to the artist and be like, what did you think all that time? Like, what was it like being on the other side? Surely you had to have some idea how much I thought about you, So I think she does a good job of including the perspective of that person too.
What do you think the artist would have said if you had done that? I always think of it's like High Fidelity, right? Where they're going around trying to solve the old relationships, but I don't. I'm so curious about that stuff sometimes too, but I don't think it would give me the closure that I want.
I don't think so. In fact,
Mm-mm.
I don't want another hit from him.
Right.
I get, there's like two men in my past that my husband never wants me to see again. And that was one of them. So, yeah, I'm not sure what he would say. He'd probably be elusive, just like he always was.
Yeah, and hopefully that would be enough to be like, okay, nothing's changed here.
Exactly.
Like, okay, that actually doesn't feel good anymore. Like that actually would be the takeaway, I would hope,
Yeah, I feel like now hopefully my nervous system has changed enough to recognize what feels good
Mm-hmm.
and what is something I don't want to chase again.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it was so interesting to read this book because Dorothy also coined the term limerence. And Tara and I were kind of, we were chatting a little bit about some of the fantasies and the things she brought in. And, for readers, like it was written in the 1970s and you can tell that. But at the same time, it does still seem to kind of be the book that is like on the forefront and sort of what people reach for when they're learning about limerence. And she describes it as being fueled by uncertainty and intermittent hope. Why do you think our minds become so attached to a maybe other than certainty?
Ooh, that is a great question. I mean, I think personally, I was more interested in the maybe because it gave me something to chew on, like a puzzle to figure out. And the certainty just kind of felt boring for quite a while until now I don't feel like I have I think I chase other maybes in my life. Like the book itself was a maybe, right? Once I was in a healthy relationship. And there was one point with my therapist when I said, after Dave had proposed, and I said, I'm kind of worried that I'm still going to be interested in these men who were uninterested in me. She's like, no, I think you're just going to shift your longing to something else. Like, so it's like I'll always be that kind of longer, I'll just shift it hopefully to something else that's a little less self-destructive. So, but I guess that's for me, I think that's why I don't have a great quick answer from a neuroscientist standpoint about that.
No, I was more curious of like your perspective of that based on your experience. And like one thing I might add is like a lot of times we go for what feels familiar. So if we have our like blueprint family system, there was an uncertainty in the way that I've received love, right? My nervous system becomes so accustomed to that that's sort of how I go out in the world and like seek my next partner or who's going to, be my next attachment figure, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I kind of touch on this in the book. I don't expand on it as much as I could have. But, my father was a pretty, I would say, emotionally detached in certain ways and not super physically affectionate. Didn't always know what he was thinking. And so, if you look at that as being a figure that I attached to early on, it's no wonder that I was attracted to really elusive people I was trying to figure out.
Totally. Because it doesn't feel good, but it's familiar. So we're going to go towards the path.
Exactly.
The path in our brains that is well worn,
That's a great point. Yeah.
This book includes lots of studies of people's diaries, and I was just like cringing as I was listening to it. I was listening to the audiobook. Only because, like, I would be mortified if somebody read my same sort of versions of these. I think what Amanda was mentioning there, that you can tell this was written in the 70s, is like one lady's fantasy is that she rescues a kitten, but it's Paul McCartney's kitten, and they fall madly in love. And we were really laughing at this of like, of course, that's your like fantasy. But yeah, I thought it's very brave to share your personal journals in that way. But it can be such a good tool to like work out your thoughts and emotions as well. But sometimes I wonder if it would actually fuel limerence because you would get caught up in the obsessive nature of writing about it. So how would you balance this?
Yeah. And I think in one of the last chapters in her book where she talks about is limerence controllable? And she talks about people writing out their experience and their feelings. And she talks about how she uses the word boomerang, which like I think she means basically backfire on you. And I think the most interesting research I came across when it came to writing and overcoming heartbreak, which in a lot of ways, limerence is you're putting yourself in a situation of breaking your own heart over and over, is that the kind of like narrative writing that was very structured, that had specific goals and specific things you're supposed to be writing about, was much more successful with people being able to overcome heartbreak, especially for high ruminators, than a writing exercise where it was just write your feelings, tell me about whatever you want to happen in the future, in terms of your fantasy or something like that with that person. So I think depending on the kind of writing, it makes a big difference in whether you get stuck or sent back into limerence versus move forward into recognizing perhaps like the realities of who that LO is. And like, I think some of the cool research I came across too was cognitive reappraisal, basically fancy for reality thinking about who this person really is and how they've really treated you.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful to be able to do that. I think sometimes too, when there's a little bit of a distance, it's good to revisit those things, because when you're journaling or writing them down, they can feel really intense and heavy at the time, or even scary that you don't want to go to. And like, I know I personally have done that like recently, where you're just going back over older things and you're like, oh, it wasn't actually as bad as I thought it was. So it's nice to get a different frame of mind of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I went back through emails that I had sent the artist like in early 2000, and I was like, oh my gosh, I sound so desperate. But in the moment, man, I had thought through those emails. I had probably read them to my roommate and my mother before I sent them, overanalyzed them to death. But looking back on them now with distance, it's like, wow.
Well, both of these books touch on the theme around how longings can be intertwined with our identity. And we talked about it a little bit when you were saying your identity as being the looking for love, hopeless romantic. But now, as somebody that has found love, how did you know when finding love was helping you become more of yourself?
That's a great question. I think the difference was with limerence, I was giving up parts of myself because I was trying to, I think, mask in certain ways to look as perfect as I could for the LO, and deeply fearful of like them thinking that I was anywhere near imperfection, which of course we all are. And I mean, even that scene with the artist where I plunged that toilet, that is the perfect example of trying to erase all of your ickiness. And with love, like, with Dave, I feel like there was this sense of him cheering me on for all of who I was, the good and the bad. And I wasn't afraid to be myself completely around him. I think also I trusted him. I think the trust piece is huge. I feel like there's more feelings of shame and self-hatred with limerence, and not so much with love.
Do you think you would have been ready for Dave like 10 or 15 years before you met him?
Yeah, no way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that part was really important, that I feel like, people talk about the soulmate finding, but I feel like you have to be in the right place. That person has to be in the right place. All the other pieces have to be in the right place, and time, and that just, there's so much you can't control around that.
Yeah, it's like the being in the right place to accept the love that you deserve, right? And I mean, also being named Amanda, like I know that Amanda means worthy of love, right? So it's interesting to carry that alongside your journey and how we create these core stories about ourselves that are so false,
Exactly, yeah. And that, I think that was, I wasn't really ready to receive his love. I didn't know how to, I think, until about right around the time that I met him. I think I was softened enough finally to be willing to receive love and not just give it away to people who weren't interested.
We touched on this like a little bit, but with like social media and dating apps and just constant digital access, they can create the perfect conditions for like obsessive thinking. Do you think limerence looks different today than maybe when Dorothy first published her work?
I don't think it looks different. I think that you probably see more examples of it because culture is just fueling it. Online dating apps, social media, or just the idealized self that people put out there for other people to consume. But I mean, she dedicated the book to Stendhal, right? Which I think his work was like, what, maybe over in the 19th century. And then
Mhm.
Simone de Beauvoir, she has the little blurb at the top of the book, and she'd been writing for decades, so I think she said, excellent, it deals with the subject in an entirely new way. And I think I was like, man, if I could interview her, that'd be really interesting to see what
Mhm.
she really meant by that.
Mhm.
Because no, people have been writing about and experiencing limerence for centuries, forever. So I feel like it's just has a name now, and it's being really fueled by our current culture.
I like that you said also, I think in the last book, you described it as being on a spectrum. I mean, I like to think most things we experience on a spectrum, but I'm glad you sort of named that explicitly because, someone is maybe discovering this term or reading your work or reading this book for the first time. It can maybe feel like a little bit overwhelming to be like, I'm a limerent or, like, oh God,
Mm-hmm.
like label themselves something. But if someone is experiencing limerence, what does Dorothy's book say will help?
She names several things, but I feel like every time she would talk about things, she would always be like, we need more research on this, but we need to
Right.
dive into this a little more, because she would present one option, but then be like, but then this didn't always stick. So
Mhm.
she talked about distraction, basically finding more purpose in your life other than that person. And that's so much easier said than done, the distraction piece.
Mhm.
She talked about cognitive reappraisal, even though she doesn't say that. She basically says, write down all of those aspects of the limered object that aren't so shiny, and remember how they've actually really treated you. The piss
I like that
stains they
it's
left on the toilet seat when you came to visit,
right.
or the fact that they picked you up an hour late, or whatever it is.
It's the ick list, but just a long time ago.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I think one important thing she talks about is just this sense of like trying to stop shaming yourself, which is also easier said than done, but recognizing it as is important. And then she talks about recognize the sensation as a feeling and not a desire. I thought that
Mm.
was really interesting.
Mhm.
And sometimes that worked for people, and they could be like, "Oh wait, this is the buzzy feeling. This is not a desire, it's not a sign of love, it's not a sign that I have to chase after this person. This is meant to be, but no, this is just my nervous system getting triggered." So, those are, I think, some of the things that she talks about as helpful, but not cures. The aspect of recognizing that limerence gives you a sense of control in a situation of uncertainty is important to recognize, because even I feel like shaming yourself, like rethinking how I should have done it, is still a form of feeling like you're in control when you're really not, which is why when Mon Ami said to me at my reunion, "I'm sorry I treated you badly," I was like, what? Like that,
Mhm.
he took the control right away from me from beating myself up for over a decade.
Mhm. Who would you recommend this book to?
I would say people who want to dive into more of like a clinical examination of limerence, people who like reading about other folks' journals, and yeah, people who just want to try to understand limerence from a highly clinical perspective.
It's been so great chatting with you today, and I'm curious what's coming up for you next. Do you have another book or topic that you're working on?
Thank you. Yeah, it was great talking with both of you. And I have thought about working on something related to athletes and dissociation
Mm.
and kind of healing the athlete. And so maybe that might be something coming down the pipeline, or I might just, take a much, much, much needed break for a while.
And if people are interested in connecting with you or finding the book, where can they find you online?
My website is www.amandajmccracken.com. Instagram, Amanda J. McCracken. TikTok, although I'm not on there a lot, The Longing Lab, LAB, which is also the name of my podcast, The
Mm.
Longing Lab. And I think that ought to cover most of the bases. And they can find the book When Longing Becomes Your Lover. Here it is. I was curious if they can find that most anywhere you buy books, and certainly on Amazon, obviously. I was curious if you guys saw The Body or the Flowers first.
I saw the body.
I have only seen the flowers. Wow. Okay.
What does that mean?
Oh my God. I have
That's
to
all the body.
reappraise. Wow, I'll have to reread the book now from a different perspective. Oh.
It's like, well, remember the dress a couple years ago? Do you see
the
a blue dress or a silver? I forget.
Yeah, I can never figure that one out.
No. And we didn't say this, but the cover is amazing too.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I have Whitney Hicks to thank for that. So shout out to Whitney for that. And my daughter for helping me pick the colors. So
Oh, I love that.
Sweet.
well, I didn't mention that I think two words that I think that are really important in my book and just in Overcoming Limerence, which is self-love or self-worth and realizing you are worthy of love. And as trite and corny as that may seem, it really, really is a key piece, I think, to overcoming romantic obsession. So thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Books from Your Therapist. If you're interested in the books we talked about, we'll include the links in our show notes. If you'd like to reach out to us with your own recommendations or a mental health practitioner or an author interested in coming on to share, you can email us at booksfromyourtherapist@gmail.com.
If you're in California and interested in working with Amanda, you can find her at amandathrockmorton.com. You can follow us on socials. We are at Books From Your Therapist on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and Substack. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please let us know by leaving us a nice review.
Happy remembering your self-worth.
I was going to say that. Okay. Happy
Self-love?
Happy finding the self-love.
Yes.
And overcoming limerence. Happy overcoming limerence and finding self-love.